all, I would like to send you all greetings from Pilar Sorso, our president, the president of IBAM, who has been texting us insistently since yesterday morning, asking us how things are going on, how things... She's very nice, you know, and she would have hugged each one of you, so please feel you have been hugged by her. So we're going to introduce now two very important people who are going to have a lot to say in this marine litter sector. And first of all, we will be listening to Catherine Barrett, who belongs to the fishing to the Fishing for Litter national. She manages fishing for litter and the national program in Ireland, and also she's working very intensively in this sector. And also we will be joined by Izaskun López, who is an expert in data analysis and treatment. All this we have heard about small data, big data, and she will be speaking about very boring stuff on how to get the best value from all this data. And remember that these data are very difficult to get from the ocean. Okay, with no further ado, I'll now pass the floor to Catherine.
So thank you very much for inviting me to beautiful Tenerife. It's beautiful. And I think even though I don't have Spanish, I apologize. What has struck me today and through the agenda that we see, we all have the same purpose. We want a clean ocean, a healthy ocean for everybody. And I think that's transcending us. And I think the Sustainable Development Goals helps us to do that we can anchor things on that, as well as our European policies, which we'll talk about. So first of all, just a little bit about me. This lighthouse in particular is, my children are fourth generation, so living near the coast has been a really important piece of not only my work but my family. My eldest brother is a professional fisherman. You can see he's got a lobster that he's returning after what we call V-notching, so that if she's V-notched, she's protected by law. She can't be caught, so she goes back to breed. And I have two small children. One, his name is Cara, which is named after an Irish fisherman, and my little boy is called Macdara, which is the patron saint of fishermen. I also have a sister who is a professional sailor. My husband is he's a fishing gear technologist. So so there's a lot of discussion around my house and around my table about the ocean, the winds, whether it is good for fishing, whether it is good for swimming, so we have very robust discussions. And here, I suppose today is International Women's Day, so, that we're surrounded by very strong women, and may we be inspired and inspire. So that's in that picture. I have a sister, I have a cousin, I have friends that I know since I was a baby. So again, it's all of that together that brings me on this journey of interest in various pieces of my work. So in terms of my actual work, where did we start? So in the Fishing for Litter program, we have 12 ports, but we didn't start out with that. We just started out with that European project, Fishing for Litter. And we joined in suit. We followed Denmark, was active, and the Netherlands. So we grew that then to over 12 ports. And every year we work with the harbour masters, who are really key. So the fishermen have a huge job to do if they retrieve litter, and it's heavy and it's dirty. So it's very, they need to be supported. And having the right supports in the ports is key. So you can see there by the figures. So we asked the harbours to help us collect the data, and collect the figures to see. So for instance, you can see the figures there that, we, this year alone, there was over 184 tons of just marine litter. And that's been rolling since we started. So we're now at over 900 tons. But in that material, up to 60% could be abandoned, lost, or discarded gear. Along the south coast here, that is European waters. So we have at least 10 European fleets working in the most, I suppose, productive areas of European waters. So working and trying to build alliances with other fishing fleets, is important. And I hope that maybe from this meeting, some of that can be realised. Also, the ports, they are beginning to collect data on the actual retired gear. So Fishman says, here's my gear. So just like what we heard yesterday in the Azores. So we've assisted the ports to put that structure in place. So we started the data in 2022, which is legally required as well by the data. So we have a figure there of over 190 tons. So we're beginning to do that. That is the gross weight. So it could be a rope, it could be a buoy, it could be a net, so it's just the gross weight. And that's the development piece that we have to do going forward if we want to access the circular economy. So just some of these here, these are the drivers that we are seeing. So while the action of fishing for litter was a very altruistic, good thing to do, we now have just a really, really heavy, relentless set of directives and demands that are needed for us to, to move from this crisis and to get to a circular economy, to value what we have within our planetary boundaries. So we have our Port Reception Facilities Directive. So you see there, the ports are now required to have these two streams, but to me, that's where the magic is as well in that directive. It says support fishing for litter, support gear retirement schemes, and design a green ship concept. So, so out of the 60 pages, there is little diamonds, and we have to kind of look for those positive things and how can we amplify them. In the single-use plastics reporting, so, there's a couple of key things in that. We need to record all the fishing gear that goes on the market in a member state and all the fishing gear that comes off the market in a member state. And that's really challenging because us in Ireland, the gear suppliers were their own business. So I would have worked with fishermen and aquaculture and processors for seafood processors, but not gear suppliers as a business. So that's been a new cohort or a new set of stakeholders for us in our organisation. The demand of the extended producer responsibility scheme is very, very tough. The Commission expects the Member States to have that in place by the 31st of December 2024. It's a very fast clock, very, very fast, to get so many stakeholders to think differently. In our own in Ireland, we have what we call a food vision programme, and in that, the Clean Oceans is part of that sustainable food system, and Clean Oceans is tasked to be part of that. We have our own national climate action plan, and again, this is part of that climate action plan, especially when it comes to the circular economy piece for the plastics. And we have a national waste action plan for circular economy, again driven by, our collective European demands. And I'll get into that a little bit. And then we had a visit from the OECD, and they made a report of the circular economy in Ireland across the economy, and where our rate is only at 2%. The European average, I think, is about 12 or 13%. So we have to see what are the barriers in Ireland. Why? Is it because we're an island? Is it because we don't have scale in certain businesses around waste management and recycling? So all of those are very there are all of these things that are all these little plates are spinning, all the time. And the objective of the Clean Oceans is that we do want to see these plastics as reusable material where possible, and really kind of reach that ambition of a circular economy for the sector. So just here, I think every member state will have the targets at the very least. So municipal waste, which is your typical black bin, that the material in that is to be recycled. We're currently at a legal target of 50%, and that's going to increase year on year to keep within our planetary boundaries of recovery and use of materials. And you can see all the different materials have different targets. So these are from our own national reports, but I think you probably will have, other member states will have the same. These are European-driven targets. You can see as a country, we're flatlining. So we've got to a level of recycling. And it's like, well, how do you push that to get off that plateau? So that's a national agenda. But also then looking for specifically at fishing gear, it's back to us again. So fishing gear, it's the disposal options at the moment, they're limited, they're very costly, and we have pockets of, I'll have the nylon or I'll have the rope, but they don't want it all, and they want it clean and they want it stripped, so the barrier between here's a fisherman giving it to a port for it to access a circular economy is a big step. And I suppose our program, we're saying, how can we make that little step easier to step up? There's a lack of market information about these plastics and how much they can make or not make and how much it actually costs to handle it. Because the reply, if we ask a waste contractor, no, it's too expensive, but we don't understand what that means. And if we understood more what that means, then you can design a program from EMFF money to help them in that barrier. For that circular piece. Again, the timelines are challenging. The waste permitting, and it's the same in every other member state. The waste permitting is illegal. There's legal frameworks in place. So it's like, oh, could you just recycle this? And they're like, it's not on my permit. It's not on my license. I don't have enough weight surplus. So these are things that, us in my organisation, we try to network and stay with other stakeholders in other government departments to kind of go, there's a consequence, or this is the barrier. We've had Brexit. We've had a Brexit. We've had our fleet is reducing by 25%. We have a decommissioning scheme. We have, so the challenge, and so we're asking a lot of the sector in a time when there's a lot of, it's quite depressed, and it's quite challenging in terms of survival. And sometimes that isn't the right time to thrive. So positioning this is a challenge. And, working with the gear suppliers, so they have the most barreling down the track, but yet their market is just, so out of the fleet, we have a target of 57 demersal boats that must retire from the fleet. They all are customers of Irish gear suppliers. So it's a huge engagement piece to say, please don't put your head in the sand. Please work with us and see where we can help, So the success of the directives and the success and thriving of the sector, it depends on a lot of changes and from a lot of different positions. So just, I suppose a big thing is talking, engagement, and listening. So in the top picture, we took 5, so I spoke to others. We have about 5 departments, government departments, who have an interest. One has the PRF, one has the single-use plastic, one has waste and management, another one has the waste statistics. So all of these different people are saying, I don't want to know about the rest, I just want this. But it's you need to look at it all. So we did a site visit with people who were writing the directives or writing the transposition. And they'd never been to a fishing port. They'd never seen a fishing net. So so again, we're just trying to give them that touch and feel to go, please don't make this any harder, because it is hard. Let's look for solutions that we can do together. The fishing ports The fishing harbour masters are fantastic. Without them, they are that line of command on the ground where they can assist the boats. That we can help them put in facilities. So the harbour masters and working the ports is critical. The fishermen themselves, and a lot of time, fishermen, they volunteer in other things. So we have the lifeboat service, and we have a lot of fishermen. They give their time to the lifeboat. They've got bravery medals. They volunteer where they can. They find the place to volunteer. It mightn't be with the football on a Saturday morning, but it's with other things, and it's tapping into that. I suppose that we have in a lot of us, that we would like to give something. That is us in the middle with the gear suppliers. So again, we might necessarily meet them on the quay wall, but it would be in their net lofts and also trying to have a dialogue. They've never met together as a group. They haven't an association. So you're trying to build a relationship from the bottom up. And then you have the families. So we did a festival, and we had this big campaign, and the man holding the heart, that's him with the sunglasses, and his wife and 2 children. So he said, take a picture of me and the crew and my wife. And, so we mustn't forget that behind every fisherman, there is a family who are supporting them, which is, for me, very important. So in terms of, how do we pull all this together? So in Ireland, so BIM, we're the Seafood Development Agency. So we're an agency for one department, with obviously focusing on fishing and aquaculture and seafood processing. So we divided all of this, because there's so many threads. We try to put them in pillars to say, okay, so the middle one, retrieve, is easy. Retrieve marine litter, that's the Fishing for Litter program. We do a similar program with the aquaculture. In terms of reducing, let's reduce the waste. Can we bring it in and segregate it into the fishing gear? Record. It is critical to help us demonstrate what the industry is doing or not doing. Even getting them to register, but I'll do it for you. I don't need to sign anything. I said, no. I need you to sign so I can have the numbers to say how I have a number, and they're like, okay, yeah, okay. We do a lot of referencing. So when we look at the marine litter, and we're looking at the fishing gear, we use Eurostat, we use the OSPAR. So we try to be able to have comparable information about what we're doing with other member states, and even among the ports. And the reward piece is very important, and sometimes we overlook it. The reward could be as simple as a jumper, as a T-shirt, as a hat. They said, putting a little piece on Twitter or Facebook, and it's just the little things. They'd like to be recognised, and it's not that they want a pat on the back, but they do, and they feel they are doing a very important job, and it's not recognised. Whereas this is something that they will do as extra. We don't pay them. They don't look for money. They go, we will do it. But if you could do good news, we'd be so happy. Because if they put their head up, normally it's environmentalists, and it's a very challenging place to be. In their work. And then we do reach. So we go to festivals. We hold meetings, and we have port meetings with fishermen to try to, all of this. You can't deliver in one go. It has to be a piece and a piece and a piece. But they need to have that it's connected as well. So I can't go down going, I want you to do these 5 things. It needs to be, could you do this one thing? And more often than not, if you ask them to do this, they give you that. If it's clear of why they want to, why should they do it, or why could they do it, or can they do it, they'll do it. So I think the slides will be circulated. But one of the things we had to do is map, how does fishing gear get on the market? How does fishing gear get off the market? And are we talking to those stakeholders? So putting on the market is kind of simple-ish, because you have gear suppliers. But then the difficulty is that the legislation looks for the member state to have what goes on the market of the member state. But as an island nation, we have a lot of imports. So we have imports from Lithuania, from Iceland, from Portugal, from Spain. And it's really difficult because, I have a list of 65 gear suppliers who place material on the market. but only the Irish reply to me. So we have to do, well, how are we going to get the other non-Irish gear suppliers, because it's about the gear going on the market. So it's really, it's difficult. The EPR is for the jurisdiction. So the other EPRs that we all have in our various countries, we have one for batteries, we have one for electronic waste, we have one for cars, electric vehicles, tires. But more than likely, all of those are on land, whereas fishing gear is transboundary. So it's got an extra challenge of the industry isn't networked, they're not organised, they're not self-organised, and a lot of the material is not on land. So it's a challenging environment. So, through the Clean Oceans programme, as well as the fishermen and the fishers with the fishing for litter, our harbours and our gear suppliers are also fundamental to building that picture. You can see they're coming off the market. It's much more complicated, because you can have a private waste contractor, you can have a waste contractor in the ports. Maybe a fisherman organises his own waste contractor. So we need them all to be able to record the information and the data, because that's actually critical going forward. The EPR, you have the costs here. So these are the new EPRs that are coming in under the circular economy. So we have published our Circular Economy Act last year, and we have beginning to see the legislation coming in, and including, so they've already put into the legislation the need for an EPR for fishing gear. So you can see what's required of the costs. So it's supposed to be a not-for-profit, but these are the costs that are allowed. Operational cost of the EPR, awareness raising among the sector, and you have the separate collection, transport and treatment, and the annual collection rate targets. So all of those elements must be funded from an EPR, and the main people to fund that EPR are gear suppliers. And we can't, even that engagement of the external gear suppliers to help us develop this model. So it's quite a challenge. So EPR is the Extended Producer Responsibility Scheme. 1 minute, yeah. We've done our gear taxonomy. Again, it's fundamental. Are we a country of fishing pots, or are we a country of longliners? So again, each member state is to do the gear taxonomy and give us this baseline of what it will be covered in the EPR. This is the critical piece. So we worked with our Environmental Protection Agency, because if you look in the last one, the general skip, everything is Chapter 20, and these are the European lists of wastes. So if we worked with with our protection agency, we need to open Chapter 2, because then again you're having a subclass of the data specifically for fishing gear. So it comes back to that you have a subset for the data, rather than, because otherwise it's literally buried in the municipal waste. So how can you know if material is coming on and off the market? So this has been fundamental. We also do, so coming back to the magic in the extended producer, or in the Port Reception Facilities Directive, we are doing targeted retirement programs. So we want boats to register, they register on a system, we're tracking the material on blockchain, and we're coding it as per the requirements for the data requirement, of the single-use plastic template. There's a data template. So we've backlogged it onto the template, so we can record these key pieces. And then we have a plastics recycler who came on board, who's taking it. And then all the stakeholders, the port has a data piece, the fisherman can go, there you go, look at my phone, I retired this gear, and also into the system. So there's provenance. And when we see on the plastics policy, cars and construction, they are to have certain levels of non-virgin plastic. So we're saying, well, is this a way of making this attractive to the system? We're learning from other EPRs, so Extended Producer Responsibility Schemes. This working group is fundamental. The data is fundamental. And, we're learning from them of how to actually build out. So all these work in parallel. The key thing then with the gear suppliers is that we need to treat them like a business. So we need to sit down and go, what supports are there for you? They mightn't be a BIM support, but we're mapping that around them and saying, you need to transition to a circular economy. You too need to have your, the steps of what's your baseline, what can you change, what's important to your business, what can you substitute. So it's very important that the gear suppliers, I just don't treat them like a stakeholder in my problem. I need to look at their challenges. So that's me. So thank you very much from Clean Oceans. And I will hand you back to... Oh, yeah.
Bueno, pues como se iban contando...
So, well, these over here are the outsiders here. None of us work on marine issues, on waste management issues and REDS issues. But I am here and I have been invited here today because last year I complained a lot. Because when I saw all of the presentations, I said, hey, there's a lot of data here, but where exactly are the data being stored? What do you do with this data? So they said to me, instead of complaining about the lack of data use, then come and talk to us about how we can better manage data. So we do have a lot of data. How are we now going to manage those data? So let's begin with our experience. Why do we need data? Then change. What do we need to do with this data? And for changes, we need to make decisions. What database decisions are we going to come to? And then what solutions are we going to produce? Now, those of us who work in the field of data say that we cannot improve what we cannot measure, and we cannot measure what we don't understand. So we need to do this. We have all kinds of ideas bouncing around our minds, but where do we begin with all of this information? And then at this conference, I've spoken to many different people. And basically, data is part of my basic makeup, my DNA, you know? So they come to me and say, I've got some data, what am I going to do with this data? And I say, no, that's not where that conversation needs to begin. First, we have to ask ourselves, what are our goals? What do we want to do with these data? Where do we want to go? No? What are my experiences? I have knowledge. I can't help you with your data use if I don't know your experiences, I don't know what your goals are. So therefore, I need you to talk to me about what you want to do with your data. I won't be able to understand your data if we don't do this. So what are we going to do? Let's plan, and then we're going to achieve our purposes. Now, often when I say this to people, they say to me, no, this is the way things work, and I've been working for 20 years, and why do we have to change things? Because, no, the status quo is as it's always been. So we need, therefore, to think about how to bring about change. And then people say to me, well, no, we've got this far. Why are we going to change things? If it ain't broke, why fix it? Huh? So we therefore need to say, what are your objectives? What are your goals? And then this brings us to the next stage, the changes. And recent years we've seen that we need to bring about change, and the changes have shown us that there is not a single way of doing things. So perhaps we can change the way we do things. Now, when COVID arrived, we all of a sudden had no weather data because all of the flights in the skies were full of sensors, and the information from these sensors was sent to the weather centers, and then we no longer had all of these data to be able to give weather forecasts. So we need to adapt to change. I work with people from marketing and similar sectors. Now, when I work with Vertidos, Cero, Zero Waste, which is a company that I work alongside, we often look at the data and we say, what's happening with these data? And then we decide that we can work on the data in order to be able to solve problems. We need to understand the problem. We need to know what we're looking for. And the crisis has perhaps given us opportunities. Now, this is a rather hackneyed way of looking at things, but we always find solutions and opportunities in our projects. Often we say that there is nothing being learned from what we're doing, so how can we therefore change matters? Often people come to me and say, I can't find the information. Where do I look for that information? We have to seek out this information. No? We need to know how to do this. And then often people say, well, this isn't worked out the way I expected. And this also can happen. Often you might find that things don't turn out the way that you wanted. No? For example, many years ago I was working with Esteban. Working with her, looking at data management on marine issues, on chemical compounds and similar matters. I had no idea what this is, and then all of a sudden there was something strange. I said, something strange here in these data. She said, no, nothing can be wrong. And I said, but the data are pointing to an irregularity. The data say that something is wrong. And there was something related to temperatures and currents, and I don't know what all the specific data were. And all of a sudden, there was this collection of data that needed to be analyzed. And then we had to speak to Espiritualis, with Jerónimo, we had to speak to the experts in the field. And then they had to locate the anomaly in the data. Why did we have this anomaly in the data? Now, we understand three different dimensions. First, we have the capacity to see three variables at the same time. Beyond that, we get lost, and then we look at multivariability, machine learning, deep learning, and so on and so forth. In the world of AI, and we use all of these when we work with statistics and data, because we have to be able to bring together data from many different sources and fully understand it. So once we have the data, we begin to manage that data. We then have to make decisions. We can't simply analyze data if we're not then going to use the results. No, we have to make decisions. Why are we going to use the data? What for? So when we talk about impact, we can look at you who are at high school. Now you're doing your homework assignments, for example, and you can say, hey, our final report says this, and we've drawn the following conclusions. No? What are these conclusions then? Well, I'm going to launch a product, and what is going to be the environmental impact of this product? Now, all of the waste generated by the product that I'm making, what is going to be the end impact? So I therefore need to be able to manage data to cause as little impact as possible, and therefore gathering data from the ports, from the towns, and people are not interacting with these data. So what am I going to do? I'm going to gather data so that I can ascertain where things work and where things don't work. So therefore we work on data, understanding data, exploiting that data, and then making decisions. Now, often we find areas where we don't understand things, and I say, well, we're demonstrating the data as we work. No, it's a living, learning process, and there is information that is required that we need to shine a light on. Now, we don't always have to extract all the data from our reports. No, perhaps 3 or 4 specific data points might be required. And this enables us to sharpen the focus. No, and this is what I say. No, it's about being, first of all, taking a quantitative approach, the amount of data, but then we need a qualitative approach, so we can have a quality-based approach to data, and all kinds of innovation technology projects can emerge. So I therefore like to work on both sides, quantitative data, amassing data, but then qualitative approaches. What is the word on the street? What are the findings in general terms? So often we talk about these alien concepts, machine learning, deep learning, but quite simply, we need to talk to people on the streets, how they're using. I'm sure you've heard all about ChatGPT in recent times. Now, I'm sure that you from high school have used ChatGPT for your homework assignments. I've used it as well. So you go to ChatGPT, and it produces your work for you. Is it good? Is it correct? Well, not necessarily, but it does help you to find information, to launch new products. So it is something that you can use geared towards the work that you're doing. Images as well. For image recognition systems. Now, we use deep learning for image recognition systems as well. And in fact, this is very interesting, and it can tell us much more about the world. So perhaps we should harness it and use it. Do I have time? No, I'll skip that slide. Now, if you want to know more about it, well, please come talk to me afterwards. So how do we work? Generation, loading, storage, processing, exploring. So we gather data, we upload it somewhere. No, there's basically an uploading system. Storage, no, because we have data, we need to be able to store it somewhere. Databases, there are free data, open source databases out there that you can use. Then the process, how do we clean up the data, exploration of data, how do we model the data, what do I do with it? And then the final decision. And solutions to find what sometimes seem unachievable solutions. So I can give you some examples: visualization, artificial intelligence, and application to services. So an example. You have the first example, marine litter on Spanish beaches. We conducted an analysis. And this is a publication where we looked at the OSPAR and Mar Nova information and how we could combine both of them to enrich the data. And the question that I was asked often was, does Mar Nova actually feed into the work done by OSPAR? Well, it does. Because if you combine the two sources of data, it is statistically proven that both can be combined and can function. And then, depending on different regions, different zones, both behave in exactly the same way, and we can analyze them jointly. No? And at EcoEmbis, we've worked on an emotional index of recycling. And we're talking about recycling here, and we're talking about how people feel about it, their emotional response. So what is the purpose here? It's understanding how we are in order to be able to help us to recycle more. In 2,000 surveys with EcoEmbis, to understand the behavior of people, how they recycle, where they recycle, and how we can get people to recycle more. Manoba, as well, is an information aggregator, which is going to enable us to understand, and then we work in Globant as well, on sustainability tools, and we go out to different places, and we talk to companies, we ask them about how they gather data. And in fact, there is a lot of legislation at present that forces companies to present reports on how they gather information. So this can all feed in and help us. So that is the end of my slide. Thank you very much.
Any questions? Would you like to ask any questions?
Ay, es primera de la mañana.
Yeah, it's first time in the morning, yes. Okay, Pedro.
Vale, buenos días.
Good morning. I've got a question for Catherine regarding EPR in fishing gear. You were saying that with suppliers from all the state members, you have problems because they don't respond or they don't comply with the Irish requirements. But in other sectors such as electronic equipment, something similar is happening because some other countries are putting their product in Ireland. So how is this organized? And do you think that at the European level, since it is an obligation for every single state member, so that suppliers from each member state report where they are sending their materials within the European Union? And how are you developing this EPR scheme for fishing gear? That would be interesting to know too.
With this answer. That's why we're working and learning from other EPRs So we actually have a very good relationship with our Ireland, which is waste for electronic and electrical waste, because they have certain same challenges. So what we're learning from them is that find the issue and bring it to the table of the competent authority. So we're getting these really key questions from the gear suppliers ourselves, and then we table those and go, how are we going to address this and this? Because it is a huge new area for us. So the Department of Environment oversees all of the EPRs, so they've seen the problems with others. So, but we're very early, so like the EPR must be in place by the 31st of December 2024. So we still, and sometimes the government says, oh, we'll worry about it on the 30th because it's going to be your problem. So we have to bring that engagement early and intense it early so we do get those right answers. But it's, to use a word, it is a journey because we have to come up with the problems because they've been so used to programs that are very clear in a jurisdiction because it's land-based, whereas this is yet another complication. I wouldn't say that the other gear suppliers are not compliant yet because there's nothing to comply to. We're still in that early phase. But we're looking for that early engagement because you need to we need to decide who is the board of that EPR and should there be a representation from international gear suppliers? Or is it just all run by an Irish gear suppliers? And that's the thing. So we want them to engage with us now, so they have a choice to participate and design an EPR with us, considering that we expect a high amount of material that our ports will have to be responsible for, and the Irish EPR will have to cost. So the engagement is critical. So I wouldn't say that they're not complying. They're just going, not my circus, not my monkey,
Thanks. ¿Tenemos tiempo? ¿Alguna pregunta más? ¿Sí?
Gracias. Mi pregunta es para Isa. Mencionó el detalle de las encuestas, que fue primordialmente para ver cómo las personas se sentían al reciclar, para poder lograr llevarlos a reciclar más, pero ¿lograron reciclar mejor o todavía esa información no?
El proyecto está empezando, esto es para empezar a entender, para luego crecer. Entonces, el objetivo es que vayan a reciclar mejor y más.
I have a proposal. Maybe, since we have Izaskun here, who is working on this topic, I see that this is not going to be easy, apparently. At the Mar Nova platform, is there any chance that we could integrate the recognition of waste through image? Yes, we thought about that in the past, but it entailed some complications. Maybe we should think about it again because technologies have changed, and we have also talked about with all the people who are working in this field, and maybe we could do it. But there are also some complications on how to get images from the image banks. Or maybe you could feed these banks through the images that were taken by fishermen, for instance. And maybe you can categorize them through characteristics, and then this could feed the banks. Yeah, maybe we could work on collecting data first and then through very small products. But yeah, absolutely, it's something that we can do. But it's something that we took into consideration in the past when we thought it was very difficult. Sometimes we find an obstacle and need to overcome it in the future. And this is something that we are exploring at the moment with Mar Nova.
Catherine. So my name is Pedro Sepúlveda. I work for the regional government in Madeira, for the environmental department, those bad guys. So we are lucky enough to deal with the circular economy, waste recycling, and so all those 5 departments are combined in our department. And we've been having the same issue as you guys in Ireland to understand the ecosystem, so suppliers, EPR schemes. And we've been doing a very thorough work on understanding how the market works and how can we deal with that. So I'm really interested in benchmarking your work to understand your issues, because it tend to be similar, and we have an extra challenge, which is we're on an island, so to get rid of all the waste, we need to transport it elsewhere. So that's an extra cost and an extra challenge. But I had a question for you. The question is, you've been working with the suppliers and also with the fishermen, and I'm very interested in that end-of-life app or something you've developed. And my question is, do you have any idea of how much of the gear that is sold to your fishermen is then delivered as an end-of-life fishing gear? A percentage? Is it high? Is it low? Does many material get lost or not? Because that's one thing that we still cannot clearly understand, because we're not doing this for that long. But maybe your experience can also tell us something about that. Thanks.
The short answer is no. But what we're trying to do is do that, what we call a waste characterization. So whether it is, so the OSPAR has their benchmark, but also we do the waste characterization that is approved by Eurostat. So coming back to, this is a good way that you're doing it, and the sample size and things. But it comes down to the very, very professional knowledge of that material. So you need actually, the people who conduct our waste characterization people, they're waste management specialists. They're not fishing gear specialists. So coming back to your point about, do you take photos and how do you kind of create this bank of knowledge? And I remember we did a waste characterization of materials exactly to do that, saying, this is our marine litter. Can we track the source of it? And I had a fisherman, and he was, I'm the fisherman, and I'll help you. Not a bother. And he was like, oh my God, this is hard. So a fisherman thought it was hard. So we actually brought in a gear supplier. And he was like Rain Man. He was like, he could tell if it was Korean. He could tell, he could just literally feel it. And he knew by the feel if it was Lithuanian, if it was Portuguese, if it was Icelandic. And that's really specialized. Even the fisherman was like, I'm out of my depth, So, we have ambition to do this, but you actually have to have the right person with you. But it kind of needs to be done, because when you look at that EPR and what's covered, it's in everybody's interest that we know exactly what's coming, because otherwise you will, because what they call a financial model of the EPR will be based on those types of materials, and not only who put them on the market, are those materials recyclable, are they going to be, because the EPR will be based on the principle of the polluter pays, and the eco-modulation of fees. So if you can recycle it, it'll be cheaper, like paper. And if it's really difficult, it's going to be expensive. In a business, the gear suppliers in particular, they say it's a really cutthroat, small margin business. They don't have the meat to suck it up.
Ok, pues muchas gracias a todos. Hemos acabado el tiempo, pero luego...
Thank you very much. We're running out of time. I hope you liked the presentation, and they will be available at the coffee break for answering any of your questions. Thank you all for joining us today.